So today we're going to look at the most surprising and disappointing teams so far in MLS because as we are now more than 1/3 into the season and we also have just hit the mini summer break where most of these teams are not going to play for 3 weeks because of the June international friendly. I think this is a perfect time for me to basically do a video where I look at some of the most surprising and disappointing teams so far in MLS, and I of course will have honorable mention with the surprising team and some unhonorable mention in terms of disappointment, because I don't think, when you want to be mentioned in the disappointment category, I don't think it's an honorable mention. I think it's kind of a very unhonorable mention that you of course ends up into that, even though you don't find yourself in the top five. So with that being said, let us actually begin with the first team that is surprising. And keep in mind, this is not a ranking video, so if I put these team at number one, it doesn't mean the fact that they are the most surprising team. But at number one, I'm going to say it's going to be Inter Miami. Now, for Inter Miami, what is surprising for this season is the fact that so far, these last 9 games that they've been, where I think they have been 5-2-2 so far in these last 9 games, and really ever since they start the season winless and becoming one of the last teams to get their first win of the season, they have been on absolute fire, and they have been in a very good run. And that I have also said before that, I've seen this before with Inter Miami, especially last season, where they had one part of last season, I remember, when they lost 6 in a row, and then they of course won 6 in a row, and that they basically followed that with losing 6 in a row again. And that, this has been a very streaky team. Like, when they're hot, they're a team that can be very good, but when they're not doing so well, yeah, they basically fall apart. So it's going to be interesting to see whether if that's going to be the case again this season. And that, as of now, it seems like I don't think a lot of people thought that this was supposed to be a team that is now sitting in 7th position. Like, if you would have told me that this team in the beginning of the season, where it was just an absolute mess, and that there was a lot of Miami fans that was calling for Phil Neville's head, and there's just so much chaos within the teams, and in some way within the organization too, with the whole stadium thing, and then the just so many lawsuits that they've been dealing with for the past year. You wouldn't expect them to be at the position that they are right now. But like I said, we'll see whether or not if that is going to continue, because again, I'm interested that when they do go through a rough patch, is it going to be like last season where they just go through a rush patch for a very long time and reality basically hits them. But now moving to the second team that is the most surprising so far, it's got to be FC Cincinnati. I mean, I know they had a tough loss in the game against Montreal, and I think they have now come off with back-to-back losses, which, they have come back down to earth a little bit. But I've said before, the job that Pat Nolan has done to this team is something nothing but a miracle right now. Because when you look at this team, yes, they have some talented player. Lucho Acosta is continued to be the number 10 that Cincinnati thought that he could be, and that I'm kind of surprised that not a lot of people have mentioned him in the MVP candidate race, because it seems like nowadays with the MVP candidate race, it usually come in that number 10 position, and he is really considered now to be one of the best number 10 in the league. But they also have some proven goal scored in Brendan Vasquez, really started to be that number 9 that they were hoping Brenner was going to be. And in fact, Vasquez pretty much just took that spot away from Brenner. And that, yeah, this is a very fun team to watch. And the other thing that I want to also say about this Cincinnati team is that, their defense so far this season, yes, I know when you look at the goals that they have allowed, that I've, made a video earlier talk about how they are still considered to be the top 5 worst defense in the league. If you look at the amount of goals that they have allowed, it's gotten much better in recently, and a lot of that has to do with Roman Sanitano in goal. Has been just come to a point where he is starting to be consideration for the U.S. men's national team. Like, I know right now, he's definitely in a good form, but it's interesting that he is already considered to be the U.S. men's national team goalkeeper in the future. Considered, goalkeeping is definitely one of the big issues that the national team is having. But, with the form that he's been in right now, I won't be surprised that if he keep this up, he could definitely be in that discussion. But, most of the part why Cincinnati has been so surprising is that when you also look at this team it's not like this team improved a lot from last season. It's not like Cincinnati just completely blow it up last season and put in a fresh new squad. Most part of this squad is very similar to the one last season, but I think the other maybe surprising factor, or maybe a factor that I think the MLS gods finally show some mercy to Cincinnati, is that we're not seeing those heartbreaking loss every single week. I mean, we're still seeing it with this team occasionally, but it was not like every week, which is maybe why I think, as much as it's surprised that Cincinnati has got off to a good start, maybe if you look at it that way, it shouldn't be surprising, because it was going to be bound that when you have a team that as cursed as Cincinnati was last season, it was bound. Their luck was bound to change, and the luck has definitely changed for this team for majority of this season. And I mean, while they might not make it to the playoffs this season, even though I know they're in the playoff position, but it's gonna be very, like, I think it would be even a bigger shock if they do make it to the playoffs. Consider the expectation this season was just simply not win the wooden spoon. I mean, anywhere besides finishing dead last in the East is considered a success, and right now they are not only exceeding that expectation, but they're going through an expectation that nobody thought that this was possible, at least at the very minimum, maybe 2 or 3 years down the line, which is potentially be a playoff contender in the East. But now moving to the next team. Now, this one is tough because, I know there's been so much turmoil that's going on with Charlotte FC, and, I can, of course, once again talk about the situation with Miguel Angel Ramirez and the whole situation with the front office, and now there's some news source that maybe one of the big reasons why he was fired was because one of the DP player decided to go to the front office and tell that he's not going to play for Miguel Angel Ramirez or play for this team if he still is head coaching this team, which again, a lot more of that detail we'll talk about in tomorrow's news of the week episode. But if you kind of just ignore that, and just before before this whole turmoil situation that Charlotte FC have got themselves into, this is a team that has exceeded every expectation. Like, this is supposed to be a team that, before Miguel Angel Ramirez unfortunately got fired, he was working miracles. Like, he was working miracles almost as good as what Pat Nolan has done with FC Cincinnati, where when you look at the Charlotte team, this should not be a team that should be competing for a playoff position. Like, this team, the talent that they have is so much further than all those teams that are competing for playoffs, and that all these players are really kind of punching above their weight in terms of how they perform. And again, a lot of that has to give credit to what Miguel Angel Ramirez has done, and have really get the best out of his player, and then some, to get into the position that they had. And this is also why it's kind of sad that, now we don't know what's going to happen with this team. Now that he is no longer there, and they bring in an interim head coach, we'll see whether or not, if that, of course, is going to continue. But now moving to number 4, and I know so far it's all Eastern Conference team. I promise that I am going to be a little bit even, not just talk about Eastern Conference team, but include some Western Conference team that has been a big surprise package. And one of those teams is Real Salt Lake. I mean, it's a big surprise that RSL has considered to be one of the top team in the Western Conference, because, I think they basically proved that run that they had in the Western Conference final was not a fluke whatsoever. I mean, I know a lot of people, including myself, thought it was maybe just a fluke, because maybe it's just kind of one of those time where they just got hot at the right moment and get themselves through all the way to the Western Conference final. But we don't know if that's going to continue as we get into next season, especially when you also look at how they play under Pablo Mastroeni, who I think Pablo Mastroeni is another head coach that I think there's got to be a lot of credit to give to him, because I think last season he wasn't really a popular choice when he was replacing Freddy Juarez and basically coming on an interim basis. And maybe some RSL fans might even kind of be a little bit skeptical when he was appointed in a permanent basis, because yes, while he did guide that team to a great playoff run, in the regular season he was nothing special. Like, there was times where this teams just sometimes imploded, or just the tactics that this RSL team sometimes play are just kind of really strange, and it just doesn't seem like it was sustainable. But what he has done this season is just something that has surprised all all of us. Like this team, what's also interesting about this team is that I simply cannot figure out this team. Like I don't know if this is a team that is a pressing team. I don't know if this is a team that likes to play possession. It's almost like they kind of change it up every single time, which maybe that's what's giving them success. Where it's almost unpredictable how you prepare against RSL like that. When you are a coach that is able to play in different ways, I think that's a good ways to get your team to play, because when the opposition don't know how they're gonna look. Like most of the time when you play against a team, you might know what exactly their game plan is. That isn't going to be the case when you play against RSL, because they are just such an unpredictable team. They can play in different style of play, and that I think that's kind of what makes them good too. And not to mention, I feel like this is an RSL team that I think when I watch their games, especially their home games with their TV feed, they mention many times that this team has started to have that feeling of the mid 2000 and even in the 2010s, when we know that RSL were one of the dominant force back when they came into the league. And in some way that's kind of true, because again, this is a team that I also would say that there really isn't like a lot of big names, and that there's a reason why this team always had the moniker "the team is the star," and it is because this is a team that doesn't have a lot of superstar. They have players that love playing or trust each other and love playing under their head coach in Pablo Mastroeni, and maybe that's also the reason why they have done well. I mean, a prime example of that was last season for Colorado under Robin Fraser, where that was also a team that doesn't have a lot of big names, but the reason why they've done so well is that they work hard, and a lot of guys are able to contribute at a key moment. Now, at number 5, we're going to go with the Houston Dynamo. Now, for the Dynamo, I think what surprised this season is the fact that as of now, they still haven't suffered that usual drop-off that Dynamo fans would think that this team would go. I mean, in some way, they kind of did during May, but they're still in that playoff conversation. And I think what's surprised about that is the fact that, this is supposed to be a team that's rebuilding. I think the other thing you also would say that this team maybe is ahead of schedule in the rebuild. And anytime when you're ahead of schedule during your deep rebuild, that's always great news. And especially when you look at this team, and one of the guy that they bought this off season that was a big money move in Ferreira, I'm starting to see what I thought I was going to see for him, because I know early in the season he was kind of struggling, but as the season goes along, it seems like he has performed at a very good rate, and that I think he's just another example of a good player or a good foreign player coming into the league. Maybe needs time to adapt, and once he of course is able to adapt to the league and adapt to the environment, you start to see the potential that he has. And I think he has definitely shown a lot of potential, and he's going to be a focal point for this Dynamo team going forward in terms of this rebuild. But yeah, there's no doubt that this team has performed well and probably overperformed, especially some of the placeholder that they had in terms of this rebuild. They've been doing well. I mean, placeholder like Tim Parker or even their goalkeeper Steve Clark has done very well for this Dynamo team. So yeah, I think that's got to be one of the biggest surprise. But also the biggest surprise for this Dynamo team is that they've been able to win road games. And it's not just one road game that they won, which they finally snapped a streak that goes all the way back from 2020, where they didn't win a single road game last season, but now started to be a team that is ahead of the rebuild and also winning on road. That has to be a good news for this team that has historically done very bad on the road so far. Now, in terms of honorable mention, I will give this to FC Dallas, the New York Red Bulls, and also Austin FC, again for Dallas. This is another team that, as much as I know Dallas this season, many think that things were going to be better, because, this is always a team that has, for the past decades or so, been one of the most consistent team, and the team that made it to the playoffs, which is why last season it was kind of a bit of a shock how bad they did. But, this season they finally hit right in terms of not only some of their academy player that they produced out of the academy, but also finally hit some thing that has been just kind of what holds back FC Dallas, at least for these last couple of years, which is able to get some good signing from the veteran present. Like guys like Paul Arriola, arguably the best winger right right now, and looks like he could be a shoe-in with the U.S. men's national team for the World Cup in Qatar. But also their big signing, Alan Velasco, has really performed at a rate that I think is even better than what they have. And even their goalkeeper, Martin Paus, who's, again, one of the most under the radar kind of goalkeeper, a guy that you probably you don't talk about him being a decent goalkeeper. He's been very good so far for this season, and that's something that I don't think they would have imagined, because, unlike Alan Velasco and Paul Arriola, where they thought that they were gonna good. No, I don't think they thought that getting a new goalkeeper in Martin Paz is just as good as they thought that he is right now. And then, of course, the Red Bulls, I mean, what is a surprise for them is just how wacky their season has been, and how, I guess maybe they're finally finding the trend where they can start finally winning home games, because they just got their first home win last week against East United in the Atlantic Cup, and that before that it's one of the most bizarre start to the season, where we see a team that do so well on the road, but when they do play at home, they look nothing like the team that they do on the road. Heck, they were record breakers in terms of tying the record for the longest winning streak to start the season with the LA Galaxy back in 1998. So that just adds another factor of the bizarreness. And not to mention, the other record that they break is that they become the first team to go 6-game unbeaten on the road and 6-game winless at home. And then, of course, Austin FC, I could have easily put them as a surprise too. I mean, I guess maybe a lot of that has to do with still people have some speculation of Austin being a pretender, and especially when you look at the tough stretch that they've been going through so far this this stretch that I've talked about before. Yeah, it hasn't been good. Like, they've only won one out of their last four games, and they did get that statement win against LAFC. But it's going to take more than just one statement when doing that tough stretch to prove that you are indeed a team that is for real, and not just a pretender, as many people have thought that this Austin team was when they play a cakewalk schedule to start the season. But now we go through the disappointment so far this season. And the first disappointment has to be Toronto FC. And I think the disappointment for this team is the fact that, again, this is a team that spent some big money on some signings, and yet, despite the amount of money that they have spent, it hasn't really done much. And especially even getting Bob Bradley from LAFC, where you thought that, getting into the season, I thought that was a good move for TFC, because, he's going to be a guy that not only being the head coach, but also the sporting director, making the signings and really getting this team back to the level that they were. It has not been the case. I mean, this team is just as bad as it was last year. And again, a lot of that has to do with injuries, and how, again, one of the big thing that has plagued this team is the fact that they have a very shallow kind of a team. Like, if they have their best 11, no doubt that this team can be good. But when they start having some injuries, as they have been dealing with so far, I mean, their main guy, Alejandro Pozuelo, he's been barely been playing this season, and now become one of the most injury-prone player this season. And not to also mention the fact that defense, which, again, I'm not even surprised, the fact that they have been so bad in the defensive end, because when you basically didn't address that, which was a huge issue last season, it's not a big surprise that is another thing that's been holding back this team to have good potential. Because I also think that going forward on the attack, they haven't been as bad as some people have said, but it's just that defense that has been just so awful for this year. And yes, they finally end that winless run that they had against the Chicago Fire, but it's still just been a very disappointing season, especially with the fact that they thought this was going to be the year that they will ignore what happened last season, which was a disaster year, and they can have kind of almost like Atlanta United kind of resurgence in the second year, and it just doesn't seem like that is the case as of now. At number 2 is the Chicago Fire. So, again, two teams that play against each other in the Wooden Spoon Derby in the Eastern Conference, being in the second spot. And I think what's disappointing about the Fire is that they got off to such a promising start. Like, a lot of Fire fans were very excited about this team when they got off to a decent start, and hence, even though they were kind of a boring team to watch because they were drawing 0-0 so many times, at least there's some hope that maybe things were going to be better with this team. And nope, it has not been the case, because in the beginning of the season, I think what makes them great is that at least their defense was very good and holding firm. But these last couple of games, their defense have completely collapsed, and it's not a surprise that when their defense completely collapsed, and add to the fact that they can't score so far on the attack, like so far, two big player that they bought in this summer in Jordan Shaqiri and Kasper Shabilko, both of them has been very underwhelming. And even though Shaqiri, I've mentioned in the stats video that he has tried his best in terms of providing these key passes, and he have shown some moments of brilliance, it's still not enough to justify the amount that they pay to get him. And the fact that Kasper Shabilko, I mean, in his name, Kasper, he's pretty much been a ghost so far for this season. Only 3 goals so far for the Chicago Fire. And he's kind of also started to show the same reason why the Union eventually let him go. Is a guy that, there's times where he can definitely get into good form, but there's also times where he can go into a slump, and that he's a very hot and cold kind of striker. Which, doesn't that remind you of somebody called Robert Barrich from this team? Because again, that's why I think, even though I know some people were excited that Shabilko going to the Fire can really help the attack, I think there's some, and in some cases I think that there were some warning signs. The fact that it feels like Shabilko is almost similar to Barrich, with the way that they can at times could be hot and can score the goals, but then there's times where they just, when they're cold, they're just basically snake bitten. And so far for Shabilko, I know he finally scored a goal to kind of end his drought, but we'll see whether that is going to be something means that he can now score a bunch of goals, or the fact that we're going to see the Shabilko from the game against, or from the time with the Union, where I think the last game was just a typical Shabilko performance, where yes, he did score a goal in the last game, but he also missed some of the sitters that frustrates the hell out of Union fans when Shabilko was there, and now it seems like it's the same case with Fire fans. The fact that they're very frustrated of him going for the attack. But hey, at least they have Chris Mueller in the attack, and I think at least in the short time, Mueller has actually been the most dangerous attacker for this Fire team so far this season. But now at number 3, it's Minnesota. So in some way for the Loons, it's the same thing with the Fire, where they have a decent defense. Well, a lot of that is because their goalkeeper Dane Sinclair is basically playing out of his mind. But for the Loons, it's pretty much the same problem that they had last season, and probably the year before, where they just can't score. And I was really hoping that, last season, with how many players that have kind of underachieved, especially on the attack, I thought this year, maybe last year, it was just a bunch of these people haven't been settled, and now this next year, it's going to be better. Nope. Instead, it's gone worse, because, guys like Franco Fragapane, who at least had the decent season last year, he's been a no-show so far for this season. Adrian, who knew, he's been sitting more on the bench and are basically belong in the doghouse of Adrian Heath. And even Emmanuel Reynoso, struggled in the beginning of the season, and now it seems like he's the only guy that can do things. And not to mention the fact that they've also have played Abu Denladi a lot this season. I mean, you don't play if you play Abu Denladi in front for that many times so far this season, you seriously have problem on your attack. Because while Denladi was great when he came from the Loons in the inaugural season, he has just been a complete bust ever since he was being the number 1 pick for Minnesota. And this is also why I kind of find it weird, the fact that they bought him back, even though I thought maybe this is just him going back to a familiar territory. But it's also the fact that there's a reason why we let him go in the first place, because he didn't reach his potential, and he started to become a bit of a bust. So yeah, I mean, this is incredibly frustrating to see how this team has underachieved, and that, again, there's a lot of talent in that team, but it's not being met because a lot of these players has been underachieved. And also it's a mixture of Adrian Heath with some really questionable tactics and just some incompetent kind of ways to set up the team, is also kind of a combination of why the Loons are a team that they are right now, which is a team that have been very uninspiring and are heading into a downward projectile. But now at number 4, Sporting KC. I mean, you knew this was coming. You knew that I was going to mention Sporting KC, who you could argue they are the most disappointing team this season. And I get it. Yes, losing Alan Polito was tough in the beginning of the season. And also, not having Gadi Kinda, and they still have not have Gadi Kinda play so far, which it kind of makes me question. I thought in the beginning of the season there was talk that he could come back within 3 or 4 weeks. it's now 2 months in the season and we still haven't heard word about it. So there's got to be something going on with that, and that maybe the severity of injury from Gadi Kinya is more worse than what we've thought, because again, we haven't heard his name in a long time of when exactly he's returning. But even with those two guys that have been suffering from injury, I didn't think that this Sporting KC team would be as bad as what we've seen this season. I mean, I guess you could say that maybe it's a warning sign, especially last season, near the latter part of the season when Peter Vermes has really run the team to the ground, and that in this season it hasn't been as much, but there's also times where he once again hasn't make the right substitution or make any substitution whatsoever, which is a very classic Peter Vermes move. And speaking of Peter Vermes himself, I mean, this is really the first time that we have heard his name being mentioned in the hot seat, and that again, I think there's definitely a lot of soul searching and a lot of big decision that this team needs to make either in this season or even in the off season, because what do you do with this team? Like I think even if they get Alan Pulido back next season, I don't know if this team is going to be a contender. I mean, they might do well and might do better than what they're doing right now. But right now, I feel like with this team, it's not just the attack that's been the issue. It's the defense, too. Like, I mentioned it in the stats video. They're a team that is among the top 5 in terms of most conceded goals. And that, these last couple of seasons, it doesn't matter what kind of moves that they made to improve their defense. It just have not worked whatsoever. And not to mention, also, Tim Melia has started to get an age older. And that I think this season, he has started to show that father time kind of getting ready to caught up with him. There's a lot of soul searching that needs to be done with this team, and there's got to be I know rebuild is something that Sporting KC fans don't want to hear. They want to get this core one last good run, but you just feels like this team, they're with the core that they have, that is starting to age badly, and also the questionable kind of direction that they're heading in. I mean, it's no surprise why they've been just such a mess right now, and that I expect this offseason there could be some big changes that can come from the Sporting KC team, especially if they continue to finish in the spot that they are, which is bottom in the Western Conference, and I believe are in the wooden spoon race, which, I mean, I knew Sporting KC was going to struggle, but I didn't think they were going to struggle in a rate where they could be a wooden spoon winner this season. And then at number 5, it's going to be the Portland Timbers. I mean, for the Timbers, I know it's been a slow start, and I know Timbers fans are going to say eventually they're going to turn it on, and I think they could. Like, they're dying now to play against the Seattle Sounders, how I mentioned many times. Might sound like a joke that they are dying to play the Sounders so they can win and have that second half resurgent. It's been proven, like, when you get a big Cascadia Derby win, it can basically propel your season. But when you look at this team, even when they do play against the Seattle Sounders, I don't know if they can even beat them, especially of how there's just so much problem with this Timbers team. I mean, starting with the goalkeeping situation, I mentioned last season, while Ivicic at times have shown some good performance, he's also been very inconsistent, and this season it's been proved. He has some performance that's been very inconsistent, and he has also had some performance that's been very good. That defense has been injured to hell, and haven't been good so far this season. And not to mention they also haven't had their leader Laris Mabiala in that back line too. The midfield looked kind of predictable, and that especially without Blanco being there, that midfield just cannot do much. And then going forward on the attack, I mean, they still have question in terms of the number 9 position, and again, part of that is due to the fact that they don't have the likes of Felipe Mora or even Nishko that performing the way that they expected them. Don't, in Mora's case, he's been injured a bit, and that now they're getting so desperate that they're basically putting a T2 kind of player to play in the number 9 position in Nathan. But yeah, I mean, this team, you just feel like from top to bottom there is a lot of problem in that. I mean, again, this is the same case I said about Sporting KC, about how is there going to be some big decision that's got to be made for this team of whether or not are they going to just go through a rebuild. Or, you know, right now I haven't heard a lot about Savarese potentially being fired from this team, even though there has been some whisper that he could be on the hot seat soon if this does continue. And also, not to mention, maybe this is just kind of an MLS Cup hangover that they had. But I also think that this Timbers team, just like TFC, I feel like this team is going for the same situation where when they do not have their best player, the likes of Sebastian Blanco and Diego Char, this team is not a playoff team, and that has got to be very concerning because, you know, Blanco so far. I mean, for Blanco, even with him playing these last couple of games, he hasn't been good either. So again, you know, this is where it gets even more frustrating if you're a Timbers fan, where even when your best player is not performing, and also not to mention when you have Bill Tuiluma as your top goal scorer and your center back that is being the most influence on the attack, you know you have some serious issue, and there's a lot of big issue that this Timbers team has had. And again, I just don't know whether or not if they can fix it in time. Where, you know, even though I jokingly said that they'll probably do it if they do get a win against the Sounders, I just don't have a lot of confidence that is the case. Especially the Sounders have also started to get hot, and when they do face against each other, I wouldn't be surprised if when the Sounders do play against the Timbers, that the Sounders could once again win big, like what happened than last season. But now going to the unhonorable mention, we got the Vancouver Whitecaps, the Colorado Rapids, and also Atlanta United. And, you know, for Vancouver, I mentioned many times they've been one of the most cursed team in MLS because, again, you look at all the underlying number, they shouldn't be as bad as they are right now. And also, not to mention, they've also been injured to hell. Though, that could also be the case with Atlanta United, which, newsflash, they had another injury this week. Like, this team is, like I talked about Vancouver being the most cursed team, Atlanta right now is equally the most cursed, if not the most cursed team right now in MLS, where you know, the injury list that they've been going through, it's probably now even longer than the one that the Columbus Crew had last season. And that team had pretty much almost the entire starting 11 got decimated by injury. And then, of course, the Colorado Rapids, again, you know, it just feels like, I hate to say it, but, you know, last season, with many people saying that maybe that was just kind of a fluke that they finished at the top of the Western Conference, and it kind of seems like it's the case. And really, it's a lot of that isn't. I think it basically boiled down to one big problem that this Rapids team has. They can't score. Like, they don't have a number 9 that can repeatedly score the goals. I mean, Diego Rubio is trying his best, but he's definitely not the answer in terms of that. And also, not to mention, the row form for the Rapids this season has been god awful. Like, they have not been. They're back to being a Rapids team that struggle on the road, but at least they have done very well at home this year. Though, again, that kind of finally came to an end when they play against Nashville SC, and hence that's why they find themselves the spot that they are in right now. But there you have it. That is pretty much it for looking at the most surprising and disappointing teams so far this season. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think of this video, and let me know in the comments below, did I put these team, or did I forget one team to be the most surprising team or the most disappointing team, or even in the honorable mention or the unhonorable mention if you want to kind of mention it in the disappointment list. But either way, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.